So welcome to the new series, very exciting series, Getting Married, Staying Married, we call it, and there's a reason for that. We are going to be delving into the sugya of character building, what's necessary for marriage and for life in general, of course, because everything that we learn about applies in so many different situations. You know, this is a little bit of a Hakdama, and much of today is going to really be a Hakdama, an introduction into what we are going to be discussing the next few weeks in the next coming parts of the series. So we have to understand that the purpose of the world and the purpose of us coming down to the world, says the Vilna Gaon, is to overcome problems, is to become a greater person, a more connected person, to Masakin al-Midas. And the only place in the world that does not have problems is the Beis Olam, is the cemetery. That's the only place in the world that has no problems, and most people don't want to be there. This world is about solving problems. This world is about fixing a person's self to better himself in order to reach the next world. And we grow. We have problems. We're given problems for a reason, because we are able to grow from those problems. We become stronger people. We become greater people, more connected as well through the problems that we experience in our lives. And we're living also in a generation where it's so easy to simply, if you don't like something, you return it to Amazon, or if it's not even worth the hassle, you chuck it in the garbage and get a new one. Now, that's all very nice when you're dealing with maybe a pair of headphones, but when you're dealing with a job or a spouse, then obviously things can get very, very complicated. There's a halacha when a person goes out to war. So when you encircle the army, the halacha is that you're not allowed to circle the army completely the enemy from all sides. That means when you're going over to the other side, you cannot go over and completely circle the enemy from all four sides, giving them no place to escape. So some want to say the reason for that halacha is it's an expression of mercy. Don't give them no opportunity of escape. Give them at least some Pesach, some entrance, some way that they are able to get out. But others learn differently. I think something that we can learn from. And that is that it's a strategy of war itself. And that is when the enemy knows that he can escape, then he doesn't put up such a fight. Because he knows, I can always escape, I can always go that way, I can always go that way, I can figure it out. So I don't have to put up such a fight. But if you know that you are surrounded by all four sides and there is nowhere for you to go, you are going to put up the greatest fight. You are going to try every avenue to make sure that you are successful. We live in a society where people, before getting married, have already investigated all the escape routes. They know which way out, they know which way is the best way out, and therefore, when things get tough, when challenges come their way, they just take the closest and easiest way out because they've already investigated the rule out. Whereas if a person feels that he's being surrounded by all four sides, he's boxed in, he knows that he has to make this work. This has to happen. So then he's going to give it his greatest shot. He's going to give the greatest fight. He's going to make sure that it becomes successful. And that's something that we're going to learn in the next few weeks. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to give anyone the wrong impression. But what I do want to do is prepare everyone. And this applies if you're thinking about getting married, or if you're even not thinking about getting married, and somebody even asks, like, what are you giving this for? The younger boys, what do they need to know this for? And the answer is because this is something that every single person needs to work on if one day he intends on getting married. And even if you are married, this is something you also need to work on constantly, all the time, to make sure that we're in check with reality and we know which direction we're going. So I want to come from a slightly different perspective. A lot of people probably came this evening thinking that they're going to hear about dating and about what to look for and going out and dates. That's a different series, maybe a different time, but not for now. What we're doing over here is something much more basic. But yet probably something much more important than going on dating and simply starting to date and looking for the girl that you're looking to marry. What we're trying to see over here is there are tests. Tests come up all the time in life, wherever we are, whatever we do, there are tests. Right? And Mesos Hashem says it clearly, everything's in the soil, we just have to know how to deal with it. When it comes to marriage, it's no different to anything else. If we are prepared with what is going to be, and we come already prepared with the tools, how to work on ourselves to become that best person, to become that prepared person, to become that person that can overcome the challenges, that can work on the challenges, then that changes completely the whole perspective of marriage and the relationship in general. Now, in previous generations, any training or hashkafa in marriage in general was given at home, is what you saw at home, and that was all they needed, and that was sufficient. Reb Chaim Friedlander Zatzal Mashgiach of Ponevezh has a beautiful kuntras, V'yidati ki shalom alecha, on dating and marriage. And he explains that in our times, in our generation, that is no longer sufficient. And he insists that we have formal guidelines in this exact area. In fact, I recently heard a share by someone, and they were talking about marriage and what's going on in the generation. And they were saying that they felt very much that the yeshivas and maybe even the seminaries are not preparing the boys and the girls for what could be coming up in marriage. They're not prepared for the challenges. They're not prepared for what it takes. And therefore, when something comes their way, they melt down, they don't know what to do, and they don't know where to turn. That's why it's important for a person to be very well prepared. Our youth are not used to dealing with problems. They're not interested. They'd run away from problems. They shut down from problems. And therefore, we have to learn how to tackle and deal with problems. If we are fully equipped to withhold the difficulties, the challenges that come up in life in general, and of course, obviously in marriage as well, then we stand a much better chance of keeping things fresh, keeping things besimcha, keeping things good. We're living in times where everything has to be quick, and sometimes we don't give it the chance that we should. I've had couples come to me after the wedding, sometimes a few weeks, and they're like, I married the wrong girl. This is just not for me. So much so that sometimes I'll even tell a chosan, before he gets married, I want you to know something. Don't get scared. But there may be a day that you wake up in the morning, whether it's a week later, a month later, or even a year later, and you'll be like, I think I've married the wrong girl. And they're like, why are you scaring me? Why are you telling me this? And the answer is, I'm not trying to scare you. I just want to give you a situation that may come up, because if it does come up, then you know that it's normal, and you know that it can be dealt with, and you know that it's something that happens to many, many people. So we have to learn the tools to deal with so many of the challenges, again, in life, and for sure when it comes to marriage as well. And we're going to be speaking about some of the basic things, whether it's communication, whether it's an idea of self-esteem, whether it's an idea of gratitude, whether it's an idea of expressing ourselves, something that men find a very difficult thing to do in many times, and women struggle with this. These are things and tools that we can learn on a weekly basis to improve our chances and giving us the greatest thing in the world. Somebody asked me today, is marriage be'etzem good? Or is it something that sometimes it is, sometimes it's not? The answer is, and you'll ask anyone that's really happily married, marriage is the greatest thing in the entire world. It's the greatest feeling in the world, it's the greatest satisfaction in the world, but it takes work. And only when you go through the work do you experience the satisfaction, the exact, the happiness, the simcha, the shleimus, the completion of what marriage has to offer. As I said, a disclaimer, we're not discussing shidduchim in the sense of dates and what to look for. That's a whole different series. We're talking about personal growth. If we are solid from the inside, if we learn, and we've discussed this last year when we discussed a little bit of the 7 habits, if we learn from the inside to change ourselves, to make ourselves stronger people, then automatically we've developed our character, which brings us better people, and through that we can become a much better partner for marriage as well. And it's an idea because sometimes we don't even know ourselves. I once heard a Choshev Yid was asked a question. If you had an opportunity to meet anyone you wanted, from Adam Harishon until today, you can meet whoever you want. You can pick anyone in the history of Klal Yisrael, in the history of the world from Ma'aseh Bereishis. Who would you choose to meet? And he was expecting Avraham Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, the Chassam Sofer, the Baal Shem Tov, someone. You know what he said? He said, I'd like to meet myself. And the question was like, what does that mean? He's like, many people don't even know themselves. And many people are not even comfortable with themselves. It's so easy when we interact with other people, to like other people, to know other people, to talk to other people, because we're not looking and knowing ourselves. Rabbi Twersky, Zatzal, wrote, I think it was about 65 or 85 books, whatever it was, and he said that all the books that he wrote were basically one book in about 65 different parts. And the idea that he wrote was on self-esteem. That was pretty much the common denominator, the tzad of all of his books, in different storylines, different ideas, different headlines, whatever. And he explained why. He said about himself that years before, when he was a doctor and he had a practice and people were coming to him, he was given the opportunity to go to a spa. And he was very excited because he was so busy and life was busy and life is, we've got the phone and the emails and everything's busy. When you go to this spa, you can't be on the phone, no computer, you're disconnected from the whole world. It's you and yourself, relaxing and enjoying. And he was so excited to spend a few days by himself, quiet, relaxing, with no one else there to distract him. He was very, very excited. You can't even bring a book to read, nothing. You have to sit there in your own thoughts. Came the first day, he was talking about his own experiences. He's sitting there on the first day, and he's relaxing, and he sits down, and he's like, this is just Gan Eden. This is beautiful, no phone ringing, no emails to do, no one to see. This is wonderful. And he said after about an hour and a half, he couldn't take it, because he was alone with himself. And he realized, even a yid like that he wasn't comfortable with who he is. And therefore, sometimes we have to get in touch with our own emotions. We have to know who we are, what we're capable of doing, what we have the power to do, and how we can change ourselves, which makes so much of a difference. So that's just a little bit of a Hagdama. I want to talk now a little bit, let's go back in history, because before we talk about marriage and things that could come up and how to deal with it and the tools to receive to make sure that we know what we're doing, let's go back to the very first person. Let's go back to the very first marriage and see what does the Torah look at marriage and what does the Torah define as someone to look for in a good marriage. Every person we know is created b'tselem Elokim, in the Rabbeinu Shalom, in God's image. Sometimes we don't realize it, and sometimes we only realize it when we get married. They always say you can fool the world, but you cannot fool your wife. Your wife knows you better than anybody else. You can't fool anybody. And therefore, sometimes a person doesn't realize his true value, his true worth, his true self, his true tzelem Elokim until he is married and until he's reached that shleimus. Chazal tell us that a person is not sholem, is not complete until he's married. We have to discuss that. So there's an incompletion of every single person before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Chava. Adam is described in the Torah very clearly as loy toiv. Not good, loy toiv yasod Adam levada. It's not good for a man to be alone. Only when Adam and Chava had this connection, that they had a creation and they were married, they attained this level of good because there was a completion. And a completion can only be attained when you have someone to work with. When you have someone that's sometimes showing you some of your character traits that might not be so nice that nobody else is going to tell you. Maybe no one else is even going to notice. Maybe you've hidden it in a deep, dark secret in the inside of your guf for many, many years. These things will come out in marriage, and therefore the completion happens when a person works on himself and a person works and strives towards becoming a better person, and that happens through marriage. When preparing for marriage, let's look at the Torah's idea of what it means to look for a good girl, what it means to look for a partner in marriage. Who is going to help us become that perfect person, the person that we're looking to do? We look no further than obviously the Avos HaKadoshim, the Avos Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to see what was an important factor in finding a shidduch. The Torah tells us that when Avraham Avinu wanted and called Eliezer to find a shidduch for Avraham's son Yitzchak, he made him swear that he would take a wife for Yitzchak from Avram's own family in Haran, right? Which obviously is an interesting question. And the interesting question is, why did Avram Avinu choose a wife for his son Yitzchak from Haran, his birthplace? The Ramban tells us clearly that Avram Avinu had tens of thousands of Talmidim. They weren't some Talmidim, these were Talmidim that he imbued within them tremendous emunah in the Rabbeinu Shalom. These people had such emunah in Hashem. They were amazing people. There were a bunch of tens of thousands of Talmidim Avraham Avinu had, but he didn't choose any of them. He chose specifically, after painstakingly building a community of Choshev people that were a Maimin in the Rabbeinu Shalom. But when it came for a wife for his son Yitzchak, he did not choose within his community, but rather from Haran, and these people were Oved Avodah Zarah. These people were worshipping idols over here. The Torah clearly says that when Eliezer arrived at the house of Lavan, they had to clear off all the idols so Eliezer could even enter the house. And this is the house that Avraham Avinu decided to take a wife for his son Yitzchak. What type of shidduch could this be? What's going on? Ramat Yisrael Solomon Shlita brings down this question, and he answers with an Abarbanel. And he brings the Abarbanel to explain that the family of Avraham Avinu were over the Avodah Zarah, they worshipped idols. But they had a possession in them which was unlike any other, and that was Midas Tovos. They possessed incredible character traits. And these positive character traits, which were in their blood, which was what Avraham Avinu was looking for, and that came even over the Avodah Zarah. This was the trait that Avraham Avinu was looking for in his own descendants. Yes, he had a whole community of Maminim b'nei Maminim. They believed in the Rabbeinu Shalom b'emunah shlema. But that doesn't mean you have good midas. You could be the greatest maimon in the world of the Rabbeinu Shalom. But if you don't have good midas, it means nothing. Avraham Avinu was looking for people that within their blood was good midas. Because midas is everything. I remember calling my Rosh Yeshiva Rav Scheinberg Zatzal just before I started going on shidduch dates, and I asked him, Rebbe, what should I look for? What am I looking for? What is, I'm starting to date and you're going out, you don't know what to look for, things are unclear. What is the character trait that I should be looking for? And Rav Scheinberg had counseled hundreds and thousands of couples over all the years. He had a tremendous amount of experience in a lot of this. And Rav Scheinberg told me clearly, there is only one thing, and that is Midas Tovos. If you find a girl that's got good character traits, a good Midas, everything else will fall through. Everything else will be fine. Everything else will connect. You just have to find the girl with good midas. She hasn't got this, she hasn't got that. It's all irrelevant. Midas Tovos. That's what it's all about. And I see myself so often in people's marriages that when the midas are not there, everything falls flat. Everything collapses. He could be the great guy. He's got a great parnasa. He's a charming guy. All the wonderful milas in the world. But without the midas, it's not there. And if we don't work on the midas now, Rabbi Say, again, I can't stress this enough, it takes time. It's not something that the moment you get engaged, it's like, Rebbe, teach me what to do. It doesn't happen. This is years of work. It's a long time. You may not even reach the perfection that you're going to or want to by the time you get married. It's a continuous journey your whole life. But as long as you're on the journey, as long as you're trying, then you will get there and you will become that greatest spouse that you possibly can be. And that's very, very important. Rashi tells us, when the Torah says it's not good for man to be alone, I'm going to make him a helpmate opposite him. Says Rashi, you know why? Because I don't want a man to think that there are two authorities. There's the Rabbeinu Shalom up there, and there's the human being down over here that has all the power. Rashi seems to imply that if the Rabbeinu Shalom would have not created a partner for man, he would not have had to get married, then he would assume that he's all capable of doing everything. He can shoulder all the responsibility, he can do everything he needs to do, and therefore will not be dependent on somebody else. And the Rabbeinu Shalom specifically did not want to create a world with that in the world. Simply because if we have that, then every man will feel that he is the authority. Rashi is saying no. A person would have all the greatest capabilities, but he thinks he's a yochid ba'olamai, a single power in the world, a man